Good evening, everyone. Good evening, hello, how are you? Welcome to the Perpich Center for Arts Education. Thanks for coming tonight. My name's Mary Harding, and I have two roles here. Three maybe, if you count brick and mortar, because I've been here since 1990, and we started in 1989. So I'm the dance teacher here, and I also am the dance education specialist as a part of PDR, and that will come clear in just a moment. So I just want to welcome you all to the Perpich Center for Arts Education, and I'm going to introduce Jonathan in just a moment. But I just want you to know where you're at, in case this is your very first time. So is this the first, raise your hand if this is the first time that you have been at Perpich. Thanks, Jonathan, I love it. Yes, thank you. Great, well, welcome. Yeah, we are a state agency started by Rudy Perpich in, I think the initial was like 1988, and they wrote a lot of curriculum, which of course, as soon as the teachers came in and threw it all out, you know how that goes. And then our first class came in 1989. But we are actually three components. So we have the Arts High School, which is 11th and 12th graders, for students from all over the state. It is free and public and comprehensive. And we have a little dormitory over there for our students from the four corners of the state. And they study one of 7 arts areas: dance, theater, music, visual art, media arts. Oh, I have to say Vig, because I just taught Jonathan that we call the visual art kids the Vig kids. Media, I think I missed one, literary arts, musical theater. Yeah, and we also are professional development. So that is why you're here tonight, right? So there's a team of us. There's a dance specialist, that's me, theater, music, visual arts, media arts. We work with districts and school teachers all across the country. Not the country, we only do, because we do national stuff, but all across the state. That is our job. We also have our library. And you'll go down there to the library. So we're going to do our interview with Jonathan, and then we'll walk down to the library, and we have some books for you, some about our fabulous offering for tonight. Oh, I'm so glad the students are showing up. Yay! So sometimes people don't even know like how complicated we are, right? So that's us. Perpich. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit. Now I have to get the glasses on, everybody. Let's see how that's going to work. All right, this is Jonathan Thunder, our guest tonight for our Native Authors and Illustrators series, which is our second one. Yay! And I'm going to tell you just a little bit. Jonathan Thunder, Red Lake, Ojibwe, is the illustrator of the award-recognized Bow Wow Powwow by Brenda J. Child, Red Lake, Ojibwe. He attended the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and studied visual effects and motion graphics in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the Art Institute International. His work has been featured in many state, regional, and national exhibitions, I can't talk anymore, everybody, and is in the permanent collections of museums and universities. Thunder is the recipient of the 2021 Pollock-Krasner Foundation Award for his risk-taking in painting. And then on this little computer, there's just a little bit more from his website that I just wanted to share. Thunder infuses his personal lens with real-time experiences using a wide range of mediums. He is known for his surreal paintings, digitally animated films, and installations in which he addresses subject matter of personal experience and social commentary. He is an enrolled member of the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe and makes his home and studio in Duluth, Minnesota. All right, welcome. Let's give Jonathan a good hand. So excited that you're all here. I have some questions. And if we just run through those questions, then I want you guys to all start thinking about your own questions. Do you have that? Okay, come on students, get it together. Prepare your questions. All right, so Jonathan, can you share more about your background and your experiences in school and how that has influenced your artistic journey?
Hello.
Oh,
Yeah.
here, I'll switch you.
Sure. Well, yes, thank you for that introduction. Grateful to be here, and thanks for everybody who's in attendance tonight. When I went off to art school, I didn't know, like what that meant. I'd only seen movies about artists who had lived tragic lives and were tormented, and that's why they were so great. I didn't know that you could actually get an education and training and find a career path, that was healthy and a little more stable than a lot of my heroes at the time, and maybe some now too. And I started out with the traditional stuff, like figure drawing in the mornings and learning how to paint, and dabbled in sculpture. I still have a scar on my eyeball from that. And I took some creative writing too when I was in New Mexico at my first college. So I really found a lot of enjoyment in the story, and I think that got me more in tune with a lot of the films that I considered myself kind of an indie movie fan. So my next school that I went to was back here in Minneapolis, and I studied visual effects and motion graphics. And it was at a time where I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I came home to help my parents fix up their house in Brooklyn Center, the one I was raised in, because they were going to sell it. And I was just spending a lot of time trying to get into the gallery scene here in Minneapolis, which was tough. So about 2 a.m. watching TV, and it says, go to the Art Institute International and learn how to do visual effects and motion graphics. I was like, that sounds really great, because I remember thinking that I wanted to, when I saw the first Pixar film, I was like, I wanted, learn how to do that. Because I understand that there is, this long history of traditional arts. And there's a pride and a certain fellowship with people who identify as traditional artists. It's almost like a club that if you're not part of it, you're not a real artist. But I wanted to take a practical approach, and I knew that in the digital arts, somewhere in there, I could probably find a way to support myself and then continue to pursue exhibiting my paintings and stuff like that. So during that time in college, at my studies with visual effects and motion graphics, I learned how to make films. That was our assignment, is write a film, and then you'll do the visual effects for your own film, you'll do the animation, you'll storyboard it. So I learned a lot about how to frame up an image in order to focus around the areas that you wanted to intensify to the viewer. But I learned about it from a film perspective. This was stuff that I didn't learn in painting class. Back in Santa Fe, that was more of like a free, just kind of like, if it looks good, then you did it right. And that's kind of how I melded all of my practices ever since then. My paintings, I call them my poor man's films, because it's very expensive and time-consuming to make a film. And I've made some short films, maybe once every 3 years or something. I'll have just enough in the bank and enough of a window, to create something worthy of sending out to film festivals and stuff like that. And I also take commissions, to help people tell their stories, like Bow Wow Pow Wow, where it was written, and then they just hire me to draw the images.
Like the dance one we just did, Zorango.
Yep. Just recently I worked with Zorango Flamenco for a performance at the Cowles Theater they were remaking this thing called the Conference of Birds, which is a pretty surreal and abstract film, or story in itself. So I had worked with them 12 years ago, I'll say. And they hired me back to just do backgrounds. So what I would do is kind of read. I hadn't really read dance performance notes before, so I'm just like, when you get a final script, send it to me, right?
No script, everybody.
They're like, no, that's it. You know, it's just like, oh, we're thinking this, and this will go like this, because they really like let their performers, you know, kind of take control of how they're going to perform too. So just knowing what I knew about the Conference of Birds and reading their performance notes, you know, I was able to kind of create something that the director, Susanna De Palma, was happy with, and she was very, she let me have a lot of creative freedom. You know, there was only a couple notes that she had throughout the whole thing.
So we have to thank Jeremy for coming up with these questions. That's why I brought up the dance thing, because it's my one thing that I know about. All right, so your paintings, Jonathan, incorporate masks, humanistic animals, animalistic humans. How do these elements contribute, or do they contribute to the discussion of identity in your art?
Well, I think it was kind of an evolution, you know, out of school. I painted a lot of people, just doing things. And the more that I realized that I had an overall issue with people in general, the less inclined to paint humans I became. So I started to put things on human figures that gave them an identity that I thought, you know, like meant something to me or was part of a larger conversation. And masks seems to be a good way to do that. Masks, costumes, things, people who are kind of like sewn together from various items. And in the beginning it was very personal, like a lot of my first shows were personal paintings, which made it very difficult to show those. But it seemed like people who felt the same way that I felt about things would come out to those shows and we would have conversations. And I realized that if I was feeling about one way about something, and there were other people feeling the same way about something, there was a reason for that. You know, there was like a social construct or like some kind of issue that was causing us to all be kind of from the same, you know, like tribe, so to speak, of, you know, whatever, however we felt. So then I started to look at those larger conversations and bring those into my work. And kind of like the masks and figures who are sort of transforming and stuff was really exciting to me to keep, because it helps me tell the story without creating a person. And something as an artist that you have to consider when you create a 6x4 foot canvas of a person is that if that is going to be purchased by somebody who's going to be putting it in their home or something like that, they have to live with that person. They have to wake up every day to that person. So for me, it softens the story a little bit to kind of like remove them, you know, from this plane of reality that you and I are on, and give them that kind of like mythical element.
This next question, the next question is really kind of a continuation of what you're talking about. So it's, many of your works seem to really carry social and political commentary. And can you discuss how you approach storytelling in your art and the messages that you aim to convey?
I think it's probably natural for me to just want to tell stories about stuff to give it context. Because everything needs context, you know, in order to be fully envisioned, I guess, or ingested. And I gravitate towards stories, like I said, in film, but I also, come from people who would just sit and tell stories, And I remember my dad giving me these books by Basil Johnston when I was very young, like 11, saying, here, you need to read these. Because I was already starting to have a little too much time on my hands. And I was growing up in Brooklyn Center, so there was a lot of stuff for me to get into. And I started to read these books, and I was just like, these are amazing, and I kind of looked into it. And these stories are from a culture that Basil Johnston in the 70s would travel, or he would go to these remote communities in Canada to collect these stories, and then he would rework them through his own authorship to tell them in his way of telling stories while staying true to the story. So I never knew these to be anything that was all that accessible to me, these stories. Anything that I would ever see in person in my own lifetime. And about 10 years ago, I moved to Duluth, Minnesota, from the Twin Cities here. And one of the first things I noticed was that, there were people speaking Ojibwe because they offered it at the school there, natives and non-natives that I was meeting. And I got involved with this community center that held these storytelling events. So I would go there through invitation because some of the people, were fans of my work, and they were like, hey, you need to be over here, maybe we can work together. Like nothing is by accident, right? And so these events at the time, in about 2014, were by invitation. You'd show up, full packed room of everybody who wanted to hear these in their lifetime. And the storyteller and the event host would tell everybody, shut off all your phones. You can't record this. This is not to leave the room. And I was like, wow, this is really cool, man. I feel like super special to be here. And it kind of, being from Red Lake Ojibwe descendancy, it connected me to a part of my heritage that I never knew was still a living, breathing, functioning, evolving part of our, today's society. So these stories were, very kind of like top secret. And being a good follower of tradition and a good Ojibwe that I am, of course I go out and start making paintings about these and telling people, what the story is and stuff. And I just needed to share these because the reason why they were so secretive was because, long ago it was illegal to tell these stories. Your children could be taken from you, and what more of a nightmare is that? As time has gone on, there are people that approach me like, Thunder, we think we need to, incorporate these stories in digital media, meet the kids where they're at. We're not going to tell them where to meet us. They're going to tell us where to meet them. We want these stories to live on. So I did get invited to participate in a way where I was bringing these stories to the public. Now, since then, a lot has changed. In 2020, the whole secretive thing kind of went out the window because there were a lot of people in the community that wanted to attend these stories. But since COVID was very problematic, sometimes fatal in indigenous communities, it immediately went to Zoom, and instead of a room full of 100 people, it was thousands of people from all over the country tapping into these once secret stories. And the real traditional thinkers around these, they had to adapt, and for me that's exciting, to be a part of that storytelling tradition. This story is such a part of my practice and my life that, it's just something that I really pay attention to. And it's something that I like to kind of like feed into work like this as a way to really ground myself in what I'm trying to say.
That's amazing. I don't know if anyone was here earlier today, but the themes are really resonating with our guests that we had also this afternoon. So now we're going to switch, taking a little left. So how did you get started illustrating books?
So, like I said, went to school to learn how to be a studio artist, and I've had a lot of luck in that area, but it's not like the kind of thing where, like every week you get a check for, like $900, and then you just put that towards your rent money. It's very feast and famine. You have to live with uncertainty to live that lifestyle. I happen to be a big fan of uncertainty, so that's been okay. But when people ask me, like, hey, can you draw a logo for our motorcycle club? Or like, could you, make an image for the story that we're trying to tell? If it's something that I think is cool, if it's something that I believe in, if I identify with the content and I feel authorship over it, I like to say yes, to those. And I've been lucky, very lucky, to be able to take projects that, like I feel a connection to.
How do you approach a new book illustration project?
Well, the first thing I do is I sit down at my desk and I get very centered and I write an enormous invoice for a deposit. And that centers me in the story. What I really like to do is try to read the story, through and visualize, I guess, like what is kind of like the tone of this story, because as an illustrator, a lot of times you'll be given very step-by-step notes, like bow wow, powwow. They left no stone unturned. They wanted the girl to be this high, she had to look this way, the dog had to look this way. I sent them drawings that looked kind of like what, like I thought it should look like, and they would say, no, she needs to be more like this, and, through a few more tries, I got it. So you have to be open to working with people who, like, they have a set vision. And when it comes to the author, of a story, unless you're the author and the illustrator, your job as an illustrator is to strengthen, that intent for that story. You're there to support, what that story is meant to be. And that's something that I learned, I think, when I was studying visual effects, because CG, at the time, this is in the early 2000s, people were like, oh, like now they made another movie with just a bunch of CG explosions, and it's terrible. And being an indie movie buff, I was just like, yeah, this is true, like, I like The Matrix, but was it a good story? I don't know, probably not. But Lord of the Rings was a good story. And the thing you learn about movies like Lord of the Rings is in the first film, Peter Jackson, the filmmaker, there were a lot of wide shots, like you saw the whole landscape, because he was giving you the big picture, right? You're like, all right, here's the big picture. And in the second shot, or in the second film, there's a lot of shots on the ground level, like as the camera, you're sort of like in the crowd with the things happening. But in the third film, the heads, are like this big on screen, and like you're right there in the emotion. So these are, I guess, lessons, you know, that I sort of like carried over, and that's what I bring to the table. You know, like they tell me exactly what to draw, and as the illustrator, I frame it, you know, and I light it, and I make decisions about color. So I guess that's what an illustrator can bring to the table.
You're blowing my mind about Lord of the Rings.
Pay attention.
And, well, because in my art form, it is human-sized. You know, dance as performance is human-sized. And that's it, right? We use light, and we use music. But sometimes we don't even use backdrops like you're talking about because it can overwhelm the humanity of the dancer. So yeah, whoa, I'm gonna have to go back and look at those movies again, everybody. Like get the whole picture. Okay, now Dune is going through my head, y'all. Dune is going through my head because I saw that. Landscape. Right, now we'll get back to this one. All right, so I think you already did this, but I don't know if you want to just do a little bit more about sharing specifically about the process of developing Bow Wow Powwow. And also, I guess I'm wondering about, like prescriptive is not really the right word, but maybe like the prescriptive nature of the relationship between the author and the illustrator.
So the interesting thing about Bow Wow Powwow was I knew Brenda Child before I was approached by the Minnesota Historical Society. She had come to some of my exhibits where I'd show my paintings. And I got to know her as like an aficionado of like art. Like she would just buzz around, like she was always so excited, you know, about the exhibits, and we would just have these lengthy conversations. She's a historian and an art fan, so a lot of times I would just sit and listen to her and be fascinated and learn something every time, or multiple things, really, depending on how long I let her go. But the Minnesota Historical Society kept us apart on paper, and Brenda kept, you know, a safe distance. But I did talk to her, you know, and I did say, you know, like, tell me some things that you need, you know, and she said, well, the pickup truck in the story is based on my uncle's pickup truck. So I was like, you're a Wendy girl, the main character. I didn't say that to her, but I knew it. This is a biography, an autobiography, so whenever she told me something, I imagined a little Brenda Child sitting with her uncle, you know, in a 70s Ford pickup green. And that's how I started to visualize what was happening. So whenever it came to something that was very, she's writing a story about the reservation in the 70s. And my parents grew up on that reservation, right across the street from each other, in fact. One time I asked my dad, I said, we were watching a movie where this guy had some pickup lines with women or something like that. And I said, Dad, I was a little kid, what was your pickup line with Mom? And he said, I think the first thing I said to her was, do you like peanut butter? I like peanut butter. So they know each other a long time, you know, grew up across the street from each other. So my dad would give me funny notes. I'd be like, hey Dad, what do you think about this picture with the dogs chasing the pickup down the dirt road? He'd say, the dogs need to be uglier. You know, like, those dogs look like they were purebred, you know, like, you need to make them look all mixed up and kind of like they got into a dog fight right before this. And I didn't know anything about powwows. The thing I know about powwows is that you go there, you get some concession stand food, and then watch the performance, you know, and you leave. You know, I've never danced, I've never sang on the drum. So I really had to research the different dance styles that would be portrayed. And I'm not a dog owner. I've never owned a dog. I grew up with cats. So I don't know anything about cats either. I mean dogs. I don't know anything about dogs, you know. I just know that the little ones don't hurt as much if they bite you as the big ones. So then I'm researching dogs, and I'm like, all right, you know, like maybe like this old sort of like McGruff looking dog would be the traditional dancer who barely moves, you know, they kind of like saunter around the stage a little bit. And the fancy dancer would be like a Doberman, you know, or like this fireman dogs, the Dalmatian, you know, like really wiry and kind of active. And then just kept trying to figure out the best approach for that. And I, you know, would along the way show Brenda, you know, like a sneak preview, like, hey, what do you think of this? And she'd go, it's great, because she's very busy. You know, but yeah, once I got a dialogue going with the Minnesota Historical Society, who, like I said, their editing team and publishing team were very, you know, like in control of what I was creating. Things started to flow from there.
Wow. See all those dancing dogs. All right, so this is our last question, and then we can open it up, everybody, but are you able to talk about any projects you're currently working on? What could we look for in the months or years to come?
Well, I guess just to stay on topic, 5 years, 6, something like that later, I'm about 3/4 of the way through the sequel to Bala Powell. It's taken me some time. When I made the first book, I pushed aside about a month just to sit and work on it. And I have a toddler now. So between work projects and being a dad, you know, it's I have to kind of like make little bursts of studio time. So there's that. I'd like to finish that. Yesterday, I finished an illustration project for a curriculum that will be used by the Red Lake Chemical Health Department. And that was an interesting project because they reached out to me about a month ago and said, we have an illustration project coming up. We need about 25 color drawings for our new curriculum. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, sure. You know, like I'll do anything to help. I didn't even ask them how much money they have. So 2 weeks later, they get a hold of me. They said, okay, you know, here's our notes. You know, can you get started? And here's our contract, which, you know, was very nice. But I noticed that it said they wanted everything by the middle of March.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, so you want all the drawings by March 14th? They said, no, we need to be ready to go to print by March 14th.
Oh my gosh.
But what that project is for and what it will be used for,
It's going to save a lot.
it's so important to me with the addiction rates and, you know, problems that are around addiction and alcoholism, that I pushed, you know, aside all of my other projects. And I treated it like a mural. I would get up at 5 in the morning, make a bologna and egg sandwich, and make some really strong espresso, and then just sit down and work until the sun went down. And yesterday, before I drove down here to check into my hotel. I sent him the last drawing, which was this entire family at a table, eating breakfast together, drinking coffee. And I'm pretty exhausted from that. But it's worth it, I feel like there are a lot of artists who are, what's the word? They use their practice to just kind of like serve themselves, and I love that because that's where it starts, right? It's like a healthy practice for a lot of artists, but then eventually you turn it into a profession. But the way that my life has gone, I feel a need to give back and a need to do service work when I can. And although there is a check attached to this project, I wouldn't have said yes to anybody else. I turn away almost all illustration requests that I get, unless it means something to me. So, Red Lake, I have a lot of family there, and I just want them to have good tools. I want them to have quality tools that they can feel inspired by. And I think that's a gift to me, the ability to be able to fit somehow, into my tribe as like a functional, productive, forward-moving tribal member, through my art, no less. Instead of just like standing in a room making silly paintings and being like, I hope somebody buys this. Because it gives me purpose. And it's nice to be used as that type of wheel, in the larger machine of how can we be better? How can we have practical things from art, and like help our young folks have good stuff to help themselves heal and become good leaders in the future.
It's such a beautiful wrap-up of how we use art first to heal ourselves, maybe, and then as we go through our arc, it turns into so many other things. And the giving back is, thank you for that, so beautiful. Is Wendy in the room? Can we do a question or two from the audience? All right. Okay, this is your time, everyone. I hope you did your homework. Are there any questions in the audience for Jonathan? All right, I'm gonna hand this to you.
Okay.
Please.
I don't know if you said it at the beginning, but I wanted to start from this piece, or the photo in the back.
You're what?
I want to know about the picture in the back.
Yeah, that piece is called The Lighthouse. It's a canvas painting that I created in 2021, promptly following the Three Stooges episode that was called The Elections. And it's just about everybody being in the same boat. It's a painting, but it illustrates a point that, we don't shoot the oarsmen. There's a tribal member practicing treaty rights there, spearing a walleye fish. And in Wisconsin, in 2024, there are still reports of people trying to kill indigenous tribal people trying to practice treaty rights. And the police will show up and charge them with something like firing a weapon in public while intoxicated, not attempted murder. So, taking an honest inventory in America is the gist of The Lighthouse, because when a nation has built that much power through dishonesty, and they're scrambling to try to figure out the best way forward, the best way to figure out where we should go is to look honestly at where we've been, which is not something we're doing. So, plus there's a movie that just came out prior to that called The Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe, who plays a lighthouse keeper, and I would recommend the movie to anybody who's a Willem Dafoe fan, or just likes indie films that are sort of a rabbit hole. So yeah, it kind of goes back to like my story framing, but in this case, about the U.S.
Any other questions?
How does the Anishinaabe relate to Ojibwe? Is it just like a subset or like a dialect of Ojibwe, or I don't know the relation?
The language? That is an interesting question, because so Ojibways call themselves Anishinaabe, but Potawatomi tribal folks call themselves Anishinaabe. And the sister languages that are spoken between those two tribes and a couple other tribes are also Anishinaabe. So it's almost like language was formed, you know, among those tribes because they probably were all neighbors. And even though the dialect differences can be subtle, they can also be pretty extreme. So yeah, I guess that's the best way that I can explain it.
I really love your work.
Thank you.
We recently saw you in a premiere of Lake Superior with the Center Environment, and the question is, how did you get involved with that?
I want to say I got involved with that because I started doing a series of paintings about a Lake Superior legend called the Great Lynx, or the Underwater Panther, which is based on a pictograph on the North Shore. And when I moved to Duluth, I started learning about the story as kind of being a protector of the resources in the lake, right? Like, you know, they weren't saying anything about, like, you know, the big ore boats or anything like that. The story that I heard was if an Anishinaabe were to try to over-harvest, like some copper or something, you know, from the lake, the Mishivishu would create problems, you know, for that person and probably their village. So I've been redirecting that story, you know, as not so much like the Godzilla, you know, like comes into town and he like blows everything up, but more like, okay, you know, as humans, why are we always painting ourselves as not the problem? You know, so I'm kind of painting the Mishivishu as like someone who keeps people in line. And that film that you're referencing is about how the lake is gradually warming to temperatures that it's never reached, which is causing issues and a sign of climate change. So the filmmaker reached out to me and asked me if I would be open to doing an interview.
Anyone else?
I mentioned to you that I was using some of your work with my third graders, and just like, what advice would you give to them about sharing their stories?
I would just say, especially to such young folks, to just be yourself, you know, and always be your true self, and that's where your strongest stories will come from.
That seems like an amazing place to end. Let's give a big, big hand to Jonathan Becker.